All right, today we're tackling a conflict that completely redrew the world map and, believe it or not, laid the groundwork for future revolutions. It's not as famous as the world wars of the 20th century, but it was just as impactful. We are talking about the 7 Years' War. So, let me ask you something right off the bat. When do you think the First World War was fought? Now, if your mind immediately jumps to 1914, you're in good company. That's what most of us learn in school. But what if I told you that's not the right answer? Not by a long shot. The first truly global conflict actually kicked off more than a century and a half before that. So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll look at a world on fire, ready to explode. Then, the two sparks that lit the whole thing up. We'll see how it became a world at war, how it was won, and finally, how it left us with a brand new global map. Okay, first up, setting the stage. You have to picture the mid-1700s. Europe wasn't just tense, it was a total powder keg. You had these huge empires, Britain, France, Austria, and they were all clawing for more power, more land, more influence, not just in Europe, but all over the world. See, the last big war had wrapped up in 1748, but nobody, and I mean nobody, was happy with how it ended. That peace treaty, everyone saw it for what it was. Basically, a timeout. It was just a chance for all the major players to catch their breath, rebuild their armies, and get ready for the real fight they all knew was coming. Now here's the crazy part. This massive war didn't kick off with some grand declaration. Nope. It actually started as two totally separate fires in two different parts of the world that eventually merged into one giant inferno. So over in North America, you've got Britain and France basically brawling over who gets to control the frontier, a classic colonial showdown. Meanwhile, back in Europe, you have a completely different drama. Austria is furious about losing a wealthy province called Silesia to the up-and-coming kingdom of Prussia, and they want it back, badly. Two separate issues, right? Well, not for long. The first real spark comes from the American wilderness. The border between British and French territory out there was a mess, especially in the super valuable piece of land called the Ohio Valley. So France starts building forts to claim it, and who do the British send to go tell them to knock it off? A young militia officer from Virginia, a guy named George Washington. In 1754, his little force ambushes a French patrol, and boom, just like that, shots are fired. Okay, while that's happening, things in Europe are getting weird. In a move that shocked everyone, Britain, who used to be pals with Austria, suddenly signs a deal with Prussia. This completely blindsides France because, well, Prussia was their ally. So what does France do? They do the unthinkable. They turn around and form an alliance with their mortal enemy, Austria. This whole thing is called the diplomatic revolution, and it basically threw centuries of alliances into a blender, creating two brand new super teams ready to go to war. And with these new supercharged alliances locked in, those two little sparks we talked about, they just erupted into a single massive globe-spanning fire. So, back in North America, that little skirmish in the Ohio Valley blew up into an all-out war for the entire continent. The colonists there actually called it the French and Indian War because both sides were pulling Native American tribes into the fight. Over in Europe, the continent itself was just convulsing. You've got Prussia's king, Frederick the Great, this military genius, suddenly surrounded, fighting for his kingdom's very survival against the combined armies of Austria, France, and Russia. Talk about having your back against the wall. And it didn't stop there. Not even close. The fighting spilled over into India, where British and French trading companies went to war. It hit trading posts in West Africa. It even went all the way to the Philippines. This was, in every single sense of the word, a world war. Okay, so with fighting happening literally all over the planet, how did one side finally come out on top? Well, it all came down to a really clever strategy and a couple of game-changing moments. The secret to Britain's success was a guy named William Pitt. He had this brilliant two-part plan that played to Britain's biggest strengths, its incredible navy and its deep pockets. Here's the plan. First, use the powerful Royal Navy to attack and capture France's rich overseas colonies. Second, write huge checks to Prussia to pay for their army to keep the French military tied up in Europe. It was a genius move. France just couldn't be everywhere at once. And wow, did this strategy work? The year 1759 was so successful for Britain, they called it the Annus Mirabilis, the Year of Miracles. They won huge victories everywhere, from capturing the city of Quebec in Canada to winning key battles in India and at sea. And then, in 1762, Prussia got saved by an almost unbelievable stroke of luck. The Russian empress who hated Prussia suddenly died. Her replacement was a huge fan of Frederick the Great and immediately pulled Russia out of the war. Just like that, Prussia was saved. By 1763, everyone was completely exhausted and basically broke. It was time to talk peace. But the end of this war wasn't just about stopping the fighting. It was about fundamentally reshaping the entire world. The Treaty of Paris in 1763 was an absolute catastrophe for France. They had to hand over Canada and all their land east of the Mississippi River to Britain. And just to make things even, they gave the massive Louisiana Territory to their ally Spain. Think about that. With the stroke of a pen, the French Empire in North America was just gone. And this global reshuffling came at a terrible cost. When you add it all up, it's estimated that somewhere around 1 million people, soldiers and civilians, lost their lives in this war. For the 18th century, that number is just staggering. So when the dust settled, where did everyone stand? Well, Prussia survived and was now respected as a major European power, but their country was absolutely devastated. France was humiliated, had lost its empire, and was just simmering, desperate for revenge. And Britain? On paper, they were the big winners. They now had a massive global empire, but they also had a gigantic, record-breaking pile of debt to go with it. And that massive debt created a huge new problem for Britain. How on earth were they going to pay for it all? Their solution? Start taxing the American colonies. Now, you can imagine how that went over. The colonists felt like they'd already sacrificed a lot for the war. And then, to add insult to injury, the British government told them they couldn't even settle on the new Western lands they had just helped win from France. This feeling of betrayal and injustice, it lit the fuse for the next massive conflict, the American Revolution. And that's the great irony of the whole thing, isn't it? The 7 Years' War gave Britain a global empire. It made them the undisputed superpower of the world. But in winning that empire, they also sowed the seeds that would tear it apart. They had won the world, but the question that would echo for the next 100 years was, could they actually hold on to it?